good news! We got a man! And he's chock full of Gundam references too. Camille's story just came out, and it was much better and denser than I had expected. And I actually think there's a decent chance that I predicted a lot of the future Seš'qa plotline, as well as figured out what Camille's true identity is. So if you want to hear about it, come with me, because I read every single file about Camille, so you don't have to. Okay, for the context of everything Camille, we do have to zoom out large scale. And what's larger than a flying city in the sky? We learned a lot about Seš'qa. And as for me personally, I learned how to pronounce it. Seš'qa, not Seš'qa. Seš'qa, not Seš'qa. Don't look at them, look at me. Now you might have heard the stop come out of Camille's mouth every 5 seconds. That's actually the closest translation we have to the sarcasm word for Seš'qa. More literally, Seš'qa means a midway stopping point between the road forward and the road home. And that's the general idea of the sarcasm at the time of its founding. Now 150 years ago, a certain legendary speaker of Kazdel, aka a certain roach, led the first large group of sarcasm through the Cosmic Gate onto Talos 2. And included in that group are Camille and Char's parents. Trust me, we'll get back to them. They're actually fairly important for the future Seš'qa plotline. Also, as an aside, we now have explicit confirmation that Wishadel was on Terra when the first Angloid War broke out, so she missed all that. But like they did in the Terra of old, they had no future in sight. And that is when the Sarkaz dared to dream. With that gifted fang of Sami to power their floating city, they said, and I quote, "Why should the Sarkaz be a dark brooding people with a penchant for violence and seek only warfare as their companion? New City should be a theme park with a giant wheel ride, open air bazaar, theaters, and every element of fun that could fit." They broke free from their checkered past and moved on to the future. We actually saw something similar to this in IS-5 of the OG. Of course, if you've seen my videos before, you know that I don't think everything is as they seem, and said checkered past is gonna bite them in the ass come the Seš'qa plotline. And the reason being is that we got more information on the original leader of the Landbreakers. As it turns out, the legendary Jacob, the Warlord of the Wilds, was a sarcasm from Seš'qa. And I have to imagine that that defection was probably due to ideological differences. Seš'qa pretty much fully aligns with the Civilization band after all. And so, Jacob defected with a large chunk of the sarcasm. And Seš'qa considers that incident their shame and their responsibility. It was for that reason that the Agas Mekanas, or the Keepers, were first established. And that is how this builds back to Camille. And as for why this hot piece of work matters, Keepers are always sent in to deal with their own kin. Call that fucked up or morbid, because that definitely is, but siblings are the best equipped to counter each other's unique witchcraft. Alright, quick review for Camille's story quest. We know that of the two, Char was not born with witchcraft, and Camille had it all. And after Jacob's rise and betrayal, Camille came home to see his parents dead and his brother dying. And so, it was Camille that gifted Char half of his witchcraft and blood to try and keep him alive, but it corrupted him with power. We can actually see the physical manifestation of that on his model. If you're staring at his back, for normal reasons, you'll see that this scar represents the lost half of his witchcraft, as that's where his other wing would be if he still had it. And in the quest, we learn about the prophecy of the vampires, with Char's notes interpreting it as kin slaughtering each other and generally just cursing out the world. Now, why am I just regurgitating the plot? Because it matters for the blood halo. You can see in this picture that both Char and Camille have one. Is it maybe a vampire trait? Well, for the vampires that we know of, Closure, Entelekia, and Warfarin, they don't have one. But yeah, it's that asshole, Decurio from the OG Arknights. Alright, so this next part is actually my crack theory that might be a bit hard to follow. I'm gonna go ahead and rapid fire read out all the connections because it is a lot. OG Arknights heads, you'll probably know some of this. And for my Endfield onlys, just try your best to follow along. I promise I'll reward you by telling you where the plot's going right after. Okay, the crown of the king of the Sarkaz people is called Civilite Eterna. It kinda acts like a Green Lantern ring in order to pick the king itself. In the distant past, a Sarkaz named Kelon killed the then king of Sarkaz. That king used Civilite Eterna to curse all future kings to forever face betrayal from those that they trust. Bro was a sore loser. It's very similar to the prophecy we got for Camille and Char, but they're not the same. It's some kind of derivative, probably from a Cyclops. We'll get back to that. One of the future kings is named Danzo, the former lord of the vampires. Danzo is also the older brother of Decurio, and Decurio betrays Danzo, killing him. Sound kinda familiar? Yes, there are some parallels with Faust and Mephisto, but I think this story is going towards Char and Camille being the successors of that vampire storyline. Which is why I asked a professor of Seš'qa's history about it, and he said...
But we did know that Decarial had the blood of Tikaz and handed it to the Confessarius, and that is how they enacted their ritual. So Decarial was instrumental in them being able to attempt to steal the crown.
Okay, another relevant Seš'qa king of the past was named Kisartusaj. After of course getting betrayed, the sore loser prophecy, he casted arts to forever possess his descendants. That's one of the purposes of the Seš'qa's organization called the Confessari, as they keep the lineage pure so that he can keep surviving. And his goal is to steal Civilite Eterna. And we saw in the OG that he manifested the blood of the Tikaz as the Crown of Thorns. The only other person we saw with the Crown of Thorns? Decarial, who also possesses the blood of the Tikaz. Does that sound familiar? Now, Chapter 13 spoilers, Decarial is dead. Like dead. But that doesn't necessarily mean that his lineage died out. My hard read is that Camille's weird-ass mom is actually a Confessarius, and his prophecy is a derivative from the old prophecy, specifically to fulfill their goal of stealing Civilite Eterna. What I'm trying to say is that I think Camille and Char are of Donzo and Decarial's bloodline, and Kisartusaj's goal was to make Camille his vessel, and so they implanted the twins with the blood of the Tikaz. I mean, hell, be honest, Char even looks like Decarial, which also explains why their parents do not give a fuck about Char, because that's always how they treat imperfect vessels. Char learns this and crashes out, and now has half of Camille's witchcraft. They are now both imperfect vessels. And I think that the Sami Snow Priest also divined this prophecy, and that's why they gave the Seš'qas a Fang of Sami, because in the future that they glimpsed, a flying city of Seš'qa is what helps prevent all this. Now, based on all of that, we know that the ultimate goal would be to steal Civilite Eterna. So the million-dollar question is, what's the state of it right now? Is Amiya alive? I don't know. It's been 150 years, and we don't know how the OG Arknights ends. But if it is on Talos 2, the most likely place for it to be would be Seš'qa, which is why Char's obsession with the city makes sense. I think that he's after Civilite Eterna. Now again, crack theory. There are probably a bunch of flaws in there. But if the general idea is true, then I have a very good idea for the future of the Seš'qa plotline. It will be a double-layered conflict. The first one being the Seš'qas of Ideal's past versus the Seš'qas of today. Plus, we have some additional information. We know that Char served as a lieutenant under Jacob, and in Wolfgard's character quest, there is another pack that rose up. That's why I think that the simultaneous conflict will be the Landbreakers versus Seš'qa, with Seš'qa acting as a proxy of the civilization banned. And the way I read that, the themes about that conflict would also be double-layered. The first one would be where we were versus where we are now. And in conjunction with that, what we gained versus what we lost in the process, like culture. I actually do think Seš'qa is gonna live up to its name of The Stop and like blow up or something, and from the ashes rise a new home. And if even 10% of what I said is true, then I am very excited. And by the way, none of what I said even mentions the Ether or Ardashir. There are more plot lines that can be spun up from that. But that is that. There was actually a lot more details in the files besides what I said. Like how apparently some vampires like to unironically sleep on hanging coffins. Or how Camille calls Last Rite Her Highness because she's assumedly part of the Seš'qa's royal court. But I didn't want to go too much into the weeds because I wanted to keep it as close to the plot as possible. So with all that being said, big thank you to everybody in the Discord who helped me out with the research, and especially Seš'qa's history expert Dracnus. All that to say,